This programming is sponsored by Carr, Riggs & Ingram, CPAs and Advisors, a top 25 nationally ranked full-service accounting and advisory firm offering tax, audit, accounting, consulting, and advisory services. Learn more at cricpa.com.
Energy policy.
As Hannah Merzbach reports, voters are concerned about the implications for public lands.
Belcher also delivers updates on winter road closures, evacuation notices during wildfire season, crucial information. And lots of people here don't have cell service or internet access.
KSUT is one of the lifelines that our listeners depend on to get the latest information out. That is something that could be negatively impacted.
19% of KSUT's just under $2 million annual budget comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. If KSUT were to lose that federal support,
it's significant and it would be very difficult to replace.
Tammy Graham is KSUT's executive director. She says the picture President Trump is painting of public media doesn't align with her station or its listening area, which is rural and politically diverse.
For our listeners, it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or Democrat or independent, you rely on information that's coming from local reporters that know the community.
Graham says local fundraising can fill some, but not all, of the potential federal funding gap. The rest would have to come from cuts to national programming, programs like Marketplace, for example, and local reporting.
That's the last thing I want to cut because we are in a news desert.
Where there aren't many other local outlets to pick up the slack, especially on the Ute, Navajo, and Apache lands that KSUT serves.
All right, in the background we have Black Eagle with a song called Dance With Me. You're listening to KSUT Tribal Radio here in Nashville.
Sheila Nanato is the station's tribal radio manager. She says her broadcasts are woven into many listeners' routines.
I'm thinking about the folks who don't go out of their homes, mainly our elders. You know, they only have business in town once a week, or once a month.
Otherwise, Nanato says, they turn on the radio to stay connected to their community and the world. On the Southern Ute Indian Reservation, I'm Savannah Peters for Marketplace.
U.S. markets are closed today in honor of Memorial Day. They reopen tomorrow, Tuesday, at 9:30 a.m. Wall Street time. As always, there is a lot to catch up on in the U.S. economy, and we have got you covered with Marketplace in the afternoon and evening. You can hear Rima Trace in for Kai Rizdal later today on many public radio stations or marketplace.org or on podcast.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Bitwarden, designed to strengthen online security with a password manager built to secure logins across all accounts and devices. Bitwarden.com.
In New York, where almost 30% of the population identifies as Hispanic, 2 Broadway musicals have opened this spring featuring Latino stories, writers, and cast. Buena Vista Social Club and Real Women Have Curves. As Jeff London reports, the show's producers see in that an opportunity to expand their audiences.
When the album Buena Vista Social Club came out in 1996, it was an international hit. Featuring older Cuban musicians playing songs of their youth, the CD captured the imagination of Orrin Wolf.
My desire to produce this as a musical just came from my love of the album. I'm just like, I was a Jewish kid from Cleveland.
He got the rights from the album's original producers and the families of the musicians and put together a team to create a stage show about the people who recorded the album. With a budget of $16 million, it was produced off-Broadway at the Atlantic Theater last season as a tryout.
I never wanted our idea of marketing to a Latin audience or to a Spanish-speaking audience to feel ancillary.
His team started marketing to Latino audiences very early, and the results, both off-Broadway and on-Broadway, have been dramatic.
We'd extended 3 times at the Atlantic. 60% of the people that saw the show there had never been to the Atlantic before, which is a massive number for them. And I think now 32% of our purchasers on Broadway now identify as Hispanic.
Another $16 million musical, Real Women Have Curves, is reaching out to Hispanic audiences as well, says marketer Blanca LaSalle.
We are doing advertising in the Spanish networks, some of the Spanish networks. We have done a lot of interviews
The show, which is based on the indie film about undocumented Mexican and Central American women working in a garment factory in Los Angeles in the 1980s, has been inviting personalities like Lin-Manuel Miranda and Gloria Estefan to the show and share their impressions on social media. Producer Alicia Parker says it's been attracting a diverse audience.
You see the high school student who's never been to Broadway before. You see the Broadway goer who sees everything. You see the Latinx community. You see every age in a much wider demographic age-wise that you see in Broadway statistics.
Producers of both shows say there may be a chance for collaboration going forward, but first they need to fill their theaters. In New York, I'm Jeff London for Marketplace.
Real Women Have Curves got 2 Tony nominations, by the way, including Best Featured Actress in a Musical and Best Original Score. Buena Vista Social Club netted 10 nominations, including the coveted nomination for Best New Musical. The Tony Awards air on Sunday, June 8th. In New York, I'm Sari Benishore with the Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from IL Texas, helping to prepare students for leadership roles in the international community by emphasizing servant leadership, language immersion, and character building. More at iltexas.org.
Houston Public Media exists for and by the will of Southeast Texas. We appreciate our visionary supporters for enabling us to be the essential source for independent journalism and programs that inform, inspire, and engage all Houstonians. Angela Bishop, Judy and Dr. James Bozeman, Andrea B. Bryant, Kathy Butler, the Michael and Rebecca Simo Foundation, Janet F. Clark, Marion and Paul Cones. Thank you.
This is your NPR station, KUHF Houston News 88.7, the service of the University of Houston. Get local and breaking news anytime at houstonpublicmedia.org. Listen to us on your favorite devices. Tell your smart speaker to play News 88.7.
Good morning. President Trump says Vladimir Putin is, quote, absolutely crazy as Russia hits Ukraine with another major missile strike, but he again blamed Volodymyr Zelensky for the war. What's it mean for ceasefire talks? It's Morning Edition from NPR News. Trump's plan to stop Harvard from enrolling international students is paused for now. Amy Martinez.
And I'm Michelle Martin. A Harvard scholar compares the administration to authoritarian governments that try to control universities. Also, the story of 2 World War II generals who received the Medal of Honor. One who left the Philippines as the Japanese advanced, and another who took over and stayed. It is Monday, May 26th. On this day in 1896, Charles Dow picked 12 stocks to represent the American economy, the original Dow Jones Industrial Average. News is next.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. The head of a new U.S.-backed aid program for Gaza has resigned, saying the initiative does not adhere to humanitarian principles. NPR's Daniel Estrin reports the director's resignation puts into question the future of assistance in the region.
Jake Wood, a U.S. Army veteran, says he's resigning from leading the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. In a statement, he said it's not possible to implement the plan while also strictly adhering to principles of humanity and neutrality. The plan, backed by the U.S., is supposed to replace how food is delivered in Gaza amid rampant hunger. It's come under criticism from the UN and aid groups, who say the program would limit civilians' access to aid and serve Israeli military goals. Israel says the program will keep aid away from Hamas, concentrating aid mostly in southern Gaza, with Israeli soldiers guarding nearby. The U.S.-backed aid group says it will maintain humanitarian principles and will begin delivering aid in Gaza Monday. Daniel Estrin, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
President Trump will mark this Memorial Day at Arlington National Cemetery. NPR's Ava Pukach reports the president will take part in a wreath-laying ceremony to honor the nation's fallen service members.
The 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment, also known as the Old Guard, placed American flags at more than 260,000 headstones And on Sunday, visitors place flowers at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier and at grave sites throughout the more than 600-acre cemetery. The first Decoration Day, now known as Memorial Day, was held at Arlington National Cemetery in 1868. Service members from every major American war dating back to the Revolutionary War are interred at the cemetery. Recent presidents have typically participated in a wreath-laying ceremony at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier on Memorial Day, honoring fallen service members and commemorating their sacrifices. Ava Pukach, NPR News.
As the summer travel season kicks into high gear, airports across the nation are once again being pushed to their limits. NPR's Joel Rose reports staffing shortages and outdated technology at Newark Liberty International Airport are adding to the uncertainty.
The FAA has now capped the number of flights in and out at Newark at a level that the agency says is more in line with what air traffic control can handle. The FAA says it's working to install new fiber optic lines and adding new backup systems to help with the technical problems in Newark. The FAA says it's also trying to speed up hiring and training of new air traffic controllers, but the reality is that it takes years to train them to work in complex and congested airspace.
That's NPR's Joel Rose reporting. Wall Street is closed today in observance of Memorial Day. Stocks resume trading on Tuesday. This is NPR News. Boeing has reached a tentative agreement with the Justice Department to resolve criminal charges stemming from the two fatal crashes of 737 MAX jets. The deal requires the plane maker to pay more than $1.1 billion, including more than $440 million to a victims fund. The crashes in Indonesia and Ethiopia killed 346 people in 2018 and 2019. The European Space Agency will transmit a classic piece of music into space later this week. NPR's Rebecca Hersher reports the Blue Danube Waltz is associated with space travel and pop culture.
Johann Strauss's waltz, titled By the Beautiful Blue Danube, was featured in the classic 1968 film 2001: A Space Odyssey, and it's evoked space ever since. On May 31st, the European Space Agency plans to transmit a live performance of the piece into deep space, using a transmitter in Spain that usually works on missions to Mars and the Sun. The event commemorates the founding of the European Space Agency 50 years ago and the birth of the composer Strauss 200 years ago. Rebecca Hersher, NPR News.
Stocks across Asia traded mixed today. Shares in Japan closed higher, while markets in Hong Kong and China posted losses. I'm Windsor Johnston, NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from the Skoll Foundation, dedicated to powering social innovators to transform the world. Learn more at skoll.org. And Jarl and Pamela Mohn, focusing on civil liberties, foster youth, public radio, and the arts.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Holocaust Museum Houston, featuring Ilan Ramon, A Life and Legacy, the story of the first Israeli astronaut. Exhibit opening and reception on May 29th. Details at hmh.org. This is Briefcase, brought to you in partnership with the University of Houston Law Center. Here's Dean Leonard Baines.
The rule of law is one of the most important principles in American democracy. It stands for the idea that no one is above the law and everyone is protected by it. In 1776, our founders accused the King of England of violating the rule of law and drafted the Declaration of Independence, creating a new nation. The Declaration held that governments derive their powers from the consent of the governed. These concepts are cemented in the U.S. Constitution with the powerful words, "We the people." The Constitution created a government of laws with checks and balances among the three different branches of the government. I'm Dean Leonard Baines.
From the University of Houston Law Center, this has been Briefcase. For more episodes, visit houstonpublicmedia.org/briefcase. Support comes from I Am Houston, presenting its 2025 Empower Lecture, Being Angela, Touching Hearts and Reimagining Possibilities, with trailblazer Angela Wigglesworth, May 22nd at 7 p.m. More at imhouston.org.
Morning edition from NPR News. I'm Michelle Martin in Washington, D.C.
And May Martinez in Los Angeles, California. Coming up, we'll speak with a Harvard professor who argues that President Trump is being authoritarian in his attempts to slash funding and control some aspects of school governance.
First, though, Russia has launched massive drone and missile assaults on Ukrainian cities over the weekend.
The attacks happened over the past 3 nights, even as the two countries carried out the largest prisoner exchange since Russia's full-scale invasion began more than 3 years ago. President Trump criticized the strikes while also repeating his claim that this war would have never started under his watch.
Joining us to talk about all this is NPR's Joanna Kakissis, who's in Kyiv. Good morning, Joanna.
Good morning, Michelle.
So let's start with Russia's latest drone and missile strikes. What can you tell us?
So Russia launched hundreds of drones and missiles at Ukrainian cities over the past 3 days, and these attacks have killed at least a dozen people, including children, and injured many more, and also destroyed homes. And so here in Kyiv, we consider ourselves lucky if after all that we are only sleep deprived. Here's what woke me up last night. That's the sound of Ukraine's air defenses shooting down drones buzzing over our neighborhood.
Joanna, I've been hearing you report on these attacks just about every day, and they seem to be escalating. So why has Russia intensified its attacks in recent weeks?
So, Michelle, we don't really have a clear answer, but this all happened after the Trump administration brokered a 30-day ceasefire proposal in March. Ukraine agreed to it, but Russia refused unless the West stopped sending weapons to Ukraine. And now last month, Russian missiles hit near a playground in one Ukrainian city and the crowded downtown of another city, killing 53 civilians in all, including several children. After this weekend's attacks, President Trump criticized Russian President Vladimir Putin on social media, saying Putin had, quote, gone absolutely crazy. But Trump also slammed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and former President Biden and insisted they were also to blame for the war.
So considering all this, have the diplomatic efforts to end the war made any headway at all?
In terms of ending the war, no. As I said, Russia has not even agreed to a ceasefire, even after talks between Ukraine and Russia in Istanbul. A couple of weeks ago, the only breakthrough out of those talks was an agreement to exchange 1,000 prisoners of war from each country, an exchange which took place this weekend.
And you were there for this latest prisoner exchange. Tell us about that. What kind of condition were the Ukrainians in?
So, Michelle, they all looked sickly and gaunt. Their clothes were just hanging off them. Their heads were shaved. We don't know yet what these soldiers endured in Russian captivity, but other Ukrainians imprisoned by Russia have described horrific conditions. They were starved, beaten, and tortured.
And what was the scene as these soldiers came home?
Well, it was incredibly moving and also heartbreaking. Families were gathered in this leafy courtyard in northern Ukraine, waiting to see if their loved ones would be among the soldiers getting off these chartered buses. 18-year-old Milena Moroz held a photo of her father, who has been missing since February, and she broke down when we talked. She's saying, I wish I told him, I love you, Dad. So when the buses carrying the soldiers arrived, the families rushed to hug them as they walked out. One young soldier, Anton Kobilnik, told us he'd been in captivity for 3 years.
Чесно кажучи, я зараз в Україні, я ще не дома.
He's saying, I won't really feel like I'm at home until I see my mom. We only saw a handful of these reunions. However, Michelle, most family members were left waiting in tears, including 18-year-old Milena Moroz. Her father is still missing.
Oh, it's so tragic. That's NPR's Joanna Kakissis in Kyiv. Joanna, thank you.
You're welcome.
A federal judge has temporarily blocked the Trump administration's move to revoke Harvard University's ability to enroll international students, but the future remains uncertain. In recent days, we've been hearing from Harvard students and faculty. Today, Stephen Levitsky joins me. Levitsky conducts research on authoritarian governments and leads the David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies at Harvard. Stephen, you wrote in 2018 the book How Democracies Die, where you warned that the Trump administration was acting like an authoritarian government, and you say it's happening again. What's different, if anything, this time around?
Oh, this time is much, much more authoritarian. Trump, when he won the first time around, didn't expect to win, didn't have a plan, didn't have a team in place, and was compelled to govern with more or less mainstream Republicans and conservative technocrats, and they constrained him. Trump was always very authoritarian. His instincts were always very authoritarian, but he was surrounded by folks who largely constrained him. This time around, a very, very different story. Had a team, had a plan, put in place a government that did not, full of loyalists and people who have a very authoritarian agenda. And he's completely unconstrained in his authoritarianism, except for by the courts.
Now,
so
are there
this
any,
is an all-out authoritarian assault, the likes of which we haven't seen in this country probably ever.
Are there any historical precedents with governments elsewhere trying to control schools in an authoritarian way? How do those moments compare to this one?
Frankly, this has been a more aggressive assault on universities than we've seen in other elected authoritarian governments in the 21st century. This is something that really all authoritarians do. Left-wing, centrist, right-wing. Autocrats don't like universities because universities are, in most countries, culturally influential centers of dissent. Universities are always voices of dissent. And so autocrats, whether it's right-wing autocrats in Hungary or left-wing autocrats in Nicaragua and Venezuela, almost invariably go after universities. This is straight out of the authoritarian playbook.
Now, the U.S. has a track record for attracting the best and brightest. Immigrants have won 40% of Nobel Prizes awarded to Americans between the year 2000 and 2023. That's according to analysis from the nonpartisan and nonprofit National Foundation for American Policy. Why go after, Stephen, universities, the institutions that actually attract these best and brightest minds?
Well, this is a government that is ethno-nationalist. It is turning inward. It's not interested in the kinds of international exchanges, trade, travel in and out of the country that governments in the United States consistently since World War II have engaged in. This is an inward-oriented government that is much more interested in consolidating power than in building capacity or building wealth for the future. Trade policy is very similar. This is consistent with other policies. This is a government that is rapidly breaking what has made this country great since World War II.
How does a ban on international students impact Harvard and beyond? I know financially it would be a big hit, but what are the impacts that we're talking about here?
Financial is the least of it, quite frankly. We are an international university. We have 7,000 foreign students and a huge number of foreign visitors and professors. We've absolutely feed on international exchange, on the ability of our own members to travel abroad, to do research abroad, and to bring in the best and the brightest, again, scholars, students from every part of the world. That is what makes, in part, this country great, and it's what makes higher education in the United States great. We could not be Harvard, as we've known it since World War II, without international exchange. We would cease to be a great university almost overnight.
You and others have been warning about this for over a decade, yet 77 million people voted for Donald Trump this past election. About 30 seconds to go. What do you make of that?
That people voted for Trump?
Yeah, and despite your warnings.
First of all, we have a two-party system. Since COVID, people in Western democracies, really all over the world, have been very grumpy.
I think we lost Stephen. That was Stephen Levitsky, professor of government and director, of the David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies at Harvard. Thanks, Stephen, for your time.